Hey everybody. I want to go through one of the more popular myths in New Jersey divorce law, and that is that New Jersey is a 50-50 divorce state. It's one of those things that just kind of sounds right when you say it and it hits the ear the right way, but unfortunately there's very little truth to it. And I've identified at least four reasons why that's wrong, and arguably even a fifth reason, and I'm going to go through them with you right now. All right, so number one, New Jersey is not even called a 50-50 state or community property or any of that sort of stuff, okay? New Jersey is called an equitable distribution state, and I've kind of discussed in other videos what that means, which is that the judge has a wide degree of latitude to divide the marital estate and make decisions with respect to the marriage and the divorce that he simply thinks is fair. Okay, so one of the reasons that a lot of divorce attorneys sometimes we have difficulty when we're asked to predict very, very specific scenarios is that every judge is different, every county is different, and you're kind of being asked to read the minds of people who a lot of times aren't even family law judges for very long. Okay, family law judges tend to only sit for a couple of years before they get moved to a different division. Often they didn't even practice family law before they became judges. And so it's kind of a bit of a guessing game. We can make approximations, we can rely on our experience, which is more the reason why you actually need somebody who's very experienced in this sort of thing. But it's very difficult a lot of times to predict things with specificity. Certain things like child support we've discussed are very rigid and you use calculators and things. But other times you're just trying to guess at a judge's subjective idea of fairness. Now, as a practical matter, in terms of your assets and your debts, those are probably going to be divided 50-50, at least insofar as they were acquired during the marriage. But let me explain why sometimes the math actually doesn't work out to 50-50, okay? Let's just take a hypothetical marital estate of marriage, okay? That's what we're talking about. Let's say two people who are married and they're, in their early 50s or something, they're getting divorced, and their marital estate, which is to say the net value of their assets is $1 million. And I'm just going to use that example because it's a nice round number and it's easy to work with. But, in central New Jersey, in Middlesex County where I am, or Somerset right above, or Monmouth right below, $1 million of net assets is not a ton of money. I mean, if you factor in the value of your house and the factor, your 401k, your IRAs, things like that, I mean, that's, a fairly modest net worth. It's not like you're living on Easy Street, right? So we very commonly get marital estates that are worth roughly $1 million, but what I'm about to tell you applies equally, in fact, to marital estates of all values. But let's just use $1 million for an example, okay? So right off the top, before you do anything, you're going to hire an attorney in all likelihood, and your attorney's fees and your spouse's attorney's fees by the end of this thing could be easily $50,000. And I've seen cases where it's way worse than that. I've had people who have hired me who have already started a divorce with somebody else and they've gotten nowhere and they've already blown through $150,000, which is insane. But on a real divorce, even without a trial, it's not uncommon for both sides to spend $20,000-$25,000 in attorney's fees and appraisers and a best interest valuation, that sort of thing. Well, let's just take that $50,000 right off the top. So you had $1 million estate. Now that estate is $950,000. So your 50%, which used to be $500,000, is now $475,000. So right off the bat, you're not getting 50%. You're getting 47.5%. Okay, because you've given your lawyer and all these experts about 2.5% of the estate. So that's number one. Number two, let's say you're the higher earning spouse. Okay, let's say you make roughly $150,000, and we'll just say that's the husband, and the wife makes $50,000 because she, works part-time or whatever. That's a difference of $100,000, and I've explained in other videos how we calculate spousal support. We usually take 24% of the difference in income. So just quick math, you make $100,000 more than she does, you're probably going to pay $24,000 a year in spousal support, and let's say that goes on for 10 years, and it could go on for more, but let's just say 10 years, okay? Well, now you're paying $240,000 extra. And guess what? That's all coming out of your half. Okay? So it's not like you went into this with $1 million and then there's suddenly some other pool of money, right? It's like, no, this money is just coming out of your pocket. And so if you've already factored out the 25 grand you've spent on your lawyer, and now you're going to factor out another $240,000, now you're down to $235,000 or 23.5% of the marital estate instead of 50% of it. Okay. And you might think, well, I can pay that off over time. Yeah, that's true. But there's also a present value to that. And what stinks about spousal support, at least if you're the payer, is it's a new asset, right? It's a new, or depending on whether you're getting it, it's a new debt. So it's a debt to the payer and an asset to the other person that's just created out of thin air. It's not like an IRA, which you've accumulated during the course of a marriage, which now you're just going to divide up and she'll take half and you'll take half, right? This is a whole new category where now you're suddenly liable for this payment. And a lot of times, what the payer spouse will do and the payees is they'll agree on a lump sum buyout. Well, that's, you can argue whether that's better or worse, and it depends on the buyout. But the bottom line is that shows you that there's a present dollar value. So when you look at the value of your estate, you got to also factor in or factor out the spousal support obligation. Okay. Now, you also have to think about what's called the pendente lite expenses. And pendente lite means pending litigation. So a divorce in New Jersey typically, typically will take over a year, and more commonly close to 2 years. And what I've seen now is several counties, I think 6 counties I just read the other day, aren't even doing divorce trials. If you're in Somerset County, and as I'm making this video, it's now February of 2023, Somerset County, if you ask for a divorce trial, and your case is basically already done, they're not even going to schedule it until 2025. Okay, so your cases that used to take a year are now taking 2 years. Cases that used to take 2 years are taking 3 or 4 years. All right, and during that time, you have to maintain the marital status quo. Well, let's say living at home is an untenable situation, which is why you've gotten divorced or you filed for divorce in the first place. So now you've moved out, and your wife and kids are still in the marital home. Well, guess what? You're going to still be paying at least a large portion of the upkeep of the marital home, and you're going to be paying for wherever it is you're living at the same time. So you're basically doubling your living expenses. And that's going to be the case as long as you are in this pendente lite purgatory, okay, where you are not really married, but you're not really divorced yet either. All right. So factor that out also. If you're paying $3,000 a month in carrying charges on the marital estate, and now you moved out into a new apartment, which, you have to get one big enough for your kids too when they visit, and you're paying $3,000 a month for that. Well, that's another $36,000 of an additional expense that went down the hole. And if you're divorcing for 2 years, that's over $70,000. 3 years, you're talking about basically $100,000. So if you have if you want to factor that out of the math we did before, where we were already down to $235,000 in your marital estate, okay, take another $100,000 off the top of that, and you're down to $135,000. So you thought you were getting 50%. No, you're down to about 13.5% right now, okay? Why am I telling you this? It's not to scare you. It's to emphasize the importance of having adequate representation. Adequate. Who are we kidding? Of having superior representation. Somebody who is, and yeah, I'm being a bit of a salesman here, but somebody who does this constantly. A lot of the worst divorces I've seen aren't just people who try to represent themselves, although that's bad enough, but people who hire lawyers who maybe they're a family friend or something, but they're not really that experienced in divorce law. Guys, if you needed heart surgery, you wouldn't hire a podiatrist, right? You wouldn't hire somebody who really wasn't that experienced in cardiology, but he was a doctor anyway. You really need somebody who's constantly in divorce court, like I am, and several other attorneys, all right? Because this can become a really bad situation. If you go into a divorce thinking you're just automatically going to get 50%, I'm sorry. I really hope that through this video I've been able to disabuse you of that. And that's just all we've really talked about today are the assets and the debts. I haven't even gotten into parenting time, which, listen, I'll be honest with you. And I mentioned this in my video called The 7 S's of Custody and Parenting Time in New Jersey. And if you haven't watched it, I really recommend that you go watch it if you're going through a custody battle right now. But New Jersey is supposed to be a 50-50 state in terms of custody. But as a practical matter, I'm telling you, if you're the father, it's much harder for you to get 50%. I mean, in a lot of these divorces, it's basically like it's 50-50 in terms of that's sort of the father's high water mark and the mother's low water mark. Okay, the father has to fight to get 50-50, and the wife really isn't going to do worse than that. And again, in that video, I explain why that is. I explain really the different strategies to combat that. And we can talk all day long about whether or not that's fair and how the system can improve and things like that. And that's a nice conversation to have, but ultimately it's also a frivolous one because we're stuck in a system that exists. So that's all the more reason why you should spend the money, hire a capable attorney. They say that divorce attorneys are expensive. Guys, there's nothing more expensive than not having a divorce attorney. Trust me. A divorce is a bad situation, but it can go from bad to bankrupt pretty quickly if you don't know what you're doing. All right, so listen, if you want to talk about your divorce case or your pending divorce, or if you have any questions, give my office a call. I'll be happy to help you. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Have a good day.